anukartuṁ gṛheśvari
āyuṣā kārsnyena
vayaṁ we prabhavaḥ
prabhavaḥ
are able
tvām
that
tvām
unto
unto you
anukartuṁ
do
do
the
the
same.
same
gṛha-īśvari,
O Queen of the Home,
happy
in spite of
āyuṣā,
āyuṣā
by duration of life,
tvām or in the next life
or in the next life,
kārtsnyena
entire.
Also, anye, others. Guṇa-gṛdhnavaḥ, those who are able to appreciate qualities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O Queen of the Home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you have done, even if we worked for our entire life or even after death. To repay you is not possible, even for those who are admirers of personal qualities. Purport. So much glorification of a woman by her husband indicates that he is henpecked or is talking lightly in joke. Kaśyapa meant that householders living with their wives enjoy the heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment and at the same time have no fear of going down to hell. The man in the renounced order of life has no wife and may be driven by sex desire to seek another woman or another's wife and thus go to hell. In other words, the so-called man of the renounced order who has left his house and wife goes to hell if he again desires sexual pleasure, knowingly or unknowingly. In that way, the householders are on the side of safety. Therefore, husbands as a class cannot repay their debt to women, either in this life or in the next. Even if they engage themselves in repaying the women throughout their whole lives, it is still not possible. Not all husbands are as able to appreciate the good qualities of their wives, but even though one is able to appreciate these qualities, it is still not possible to repay the debt to the wife. Such extraordinary praises by a husband for his wife are certainly in the mode of joking. Om Ajnani-timirandhasya Jnana-Anjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutaf Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakamitam Cha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubi Evachapatitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivikasa Swaminiti Namane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Navayam prabhavas tvām anukartuṁ gṛheśvari āyuṣā kārtsnyena cānye guṇa-gṛdhnavaḥ. O Queen of the Home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you have done, even if we worked for our entire life or even after death. To repay you is not possible, even for those who are admirers of personal qualities. So Kaśyapa is continuing to glorify deity here, and it's, as Prabhupada is pointing out in the Purport, this is in the mood of joking. He's kind of, overly glorifying her, and you can see pretty easily in this translation here that it's quite over the top. It's quite like, it's just, if anybody's talking to, you in such a way, then you can kind of understand it's kind of a little bit of a joke. Like, we like to joke with each other and like overly glorify each other and, talk about taking, the dust from each other's lotus feet, which is true. We should do that. But we also like to take it to like a level of joking. And this is kind of in that same mood, it seems. And as Vishnu Chitta Prabhu pointed out in his class, what is happening here is, of course, just a little bit more backstory. Of course, that Diti is approaching Kaśyapa for sex and to beget a child. And she started by glorifying him and saying all these very, complimentary things to kind of butter him up, so to speak, get him to be favorable towards her. And now he's repaying that, and he's also speaking back in that way. And as Vishnuchitta Prabhu pointed out, he's just speaking too much. He's doing a little bit too much. He's being a little extra, and he's, it's basically like, again, like this talking lightly in joke, as Prabhupada is pointing out in the purport. This goes on between husband and wife, of course, naturally, but it can be understood that this is kind of like a level of like flirting, and it's like a little bit of level of like, again, because the point is he could have just easily said, like he says in the next verse right after this, he says, we can have sex and I'll give you a child, but we have to just wait a little bit, for the auspicious time. He could have just said that very simply instead of all this stuff, queen of the home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you've done, even if we worked our entire life or even after death. It's so like over the top, and so we understand that that's the mood that's going on here, and because he's acting in this way, it's showing a little bit of weakness, you could say, or a level of, he wants to kind of give in to this request of Diti, and he's not strong enough to very firmly resist and say, no, I'm the man in the situation, and I, decide what happens here. And yes, I'll fulfill your desire, but I'll do it in a dharmic way. He could have been very firm in that way, and everything would have been, much more smooth going after that instead of what proceeded to happen. But so it's interesting as well, because Prabhupada starts the purport here by pointing out that this glorification, this level of glorification of a woman by her husband indicates that either one of two things: he is henpecked or he's talking lightly in joke. So it's quite interesting, because he's not saying that Kaśyapa is henpecked necessarily. He says clearly at the end of the purport that these praises are in the mode of joking. So out of those two, henpecked or joking, he's saying that Kaśyapa here is joking. But he brings this up, Prabhupada brings this up. And again, so it's an interesting point to kind of meditate on and ruminate on, is that henpecked men, and what does that mean? Well, it's quite a vivid imagery there of the chicken pecking at the crow, and the sharp beak, and bringing that crow bringing him into line, under her control, and bossing him around in such a way. And we see that, a lot in society. Some of us might have been in that situation. I've been in that situation, being henpecked by a woman. It's not a fun thing, but actually it's interesting because just like the kicking of the donkey, that the female donkey that kicks the male donkey, actually he's enjoying that, and the camel that's chewing the cactus, he also enjoys the taste of his own blood. It's a similar kind of thing where, although it's actually great suffering, the man that's in such a situation often thinks it's very nice, and although everyone around him can see that it's a pretty abominable situation, it's said, I didn't get the chance to pull up this exact quote, but it's in the Brahmachari book at the end there, that a man who, I'm just paraphrasing here, but a man who's controlled by a woman is not even respected by his own parents, none of his, associates or friends or family or relatives will respect him if he's in such a situation. So you lose the respect of everyone around you. You lose the respect of the woman who's controlling you as well. But at the same time, you think it's very, very nice and enjoyable that you're in such a situation. So Prabhupada is bringing this up to show, again, that this is not a favorable situation to be in. And it's interesting because even now, in this very feministic society, where, women are encouraged to be more manly and more, career-oriented and take control of their lives and also be controlling over men, even in such a situation where, again, women are kind of seen, they're put on a higher pedestal, you could say, than men in a lot of situations. even then, this kind of situation where a man is controlled by a woman is still frowned upon. You would think that it might have like reversed, that, oh, like, actually it's more respectable now in this backward society that a woman controls a man. But even now, it's actually seen that it's not respectable, you know. So even the very demoniac society, demoniac, you know, people that engage in such sinful activities, they can still understand that this is not something respectable or, you know, nice at all. And so there's a lot of pushback, you know, like women want to control men, but then men will, you know, push back and say no. Like Vishnu Prabhu was saying this morning in the Brahmacharya class about this idea that, you know, people post these videos and they're Christians and they say, you know, go to the gym and, you know, work hard, make money and support your wife and be in control of your family, and that's the topmost goal of life. And this idea is there. And it contrasts to like the henpecked men who actually, in a lot of situations, like, it's not even necessarily that there's a specific woman that's henpecking them, but they're henpecked in the terms of that they're just slaves to their genitals and their sex desire and addicted to pornography and all these such things. And they're seen as, again, even in this society that's so backwards, they're seen as like very low class. And, you know, you have to rise from that platform to the platform of taking control of your life and going to the gym and controlling your sex desire only so much that you get into a situation where you're married and then you can, you know, exploit your wife for sex. But other than that, yeah, so that's the topmost idea of like taking control of your life, is to get to that platform of being a householder. And anyways, we were talking about many other things about renunciation and stuff like that in the class, which was interesting, about the different religions having the renounced orders being corrupted by illicit sex and how it's caused this backlash, reactionary philosophy of actually it's not worth it to be renounced and all these things, and it doesn't work. This kind of idea is there. But anyways, the point being made here is that Kaśyapa is glorifying Diti and so much, and by saying such things and flirting in this way, you're joking in this way, naturally it's going to lead down a not so good path. Anybody that's spoken intimately with the opposite gender can understand that when we are joking with them, a lot of times, you know, people will make fun of someone else, and that's actually an indication that they like them and that they're flirting with them, right? And they'll bully them a little bit. And this is a way of, again, so this joking mood that he's giving is actually, again, it's just kind of enhancing that flavor in this conversation and perhaps leading down this path more towards this adharmic act that happens after this. Where again, he could have just been very firm and sober and very, you know, just, no, I'm not going to do this. We're going to, you know, act dharmically. And it's understood, even in Vedic culture, this idea, again, this is very foreign to the modern mind, to the modern Western mind, that, well, the idea is there that man is like butter and woman is like fire, and that it's best to keep the two separate, otherwise the butter will melt. And even in, you know, traditional Vedic society, generally the man and the woman, it doesn't mean if they're married that they're just always hanging out and just, you know, chatting all the time and just like, you know, having physical contact, holding hands or anything like that. There's still some level of separation. So even, you know, I mean, 3/4 of our lives in the Varnashram system are meant for complete renunciation from the association of the opposite sex. And that 1/4 that is, there's some allowance for that, even in such a situation, there's still a strong emphasis on, well, you shouldn't just freely mix all the time like that, actually. And I've heard that traditionally there would be, you know, separate living quarters, or during the day they wouldn't even see each other that much. Obviously they would sleep in different rooms, which again, in modern ideas, that's completely unheard of. And so this idea was there, this understanding was there that, well, you know, the center of our life should be, you know, God and worshiping Him and serving Krishna and, you know, acting out our dharma. And yes, we're in this situation of being married, and we should, you know, create, you know, Krishna conscious children and raise them in a dharmic way and teach them, you know, all the different, you know, principles of Krishna consciousness, all the different practices of Krishna consciousness. the men would go with the father and learn, different things like, for brahmanas, they would learn like the deity worship and stuff like Shalagram. I was reading in this book that his father was, Maharaj, Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj was interviewing, I guess it was a sannyasi, I'm not sure exactly who he was, but I'll read some of it later, but, the boys would learn from the father, because the father would every morning do Shalagram worship, and they would go with him and learn that process over years, and then the girls obviously would go with the mother in the kitchen and learn how to cook, and so everything was going on nicely in that way, and there was that separation was there. And people would just go on with their duties and understanding that it's not just about this idea now that you just associate and just have fun and just enjoy each other's company and, just enjoy your senses, have as much sex as you want, this all kind of thing. It's all completely modern ideas. And again, it sounds very crazy to the modern mind to say such a thing that, oh, well, man and wife should live together only for the purpose of begetting Krishna conscious children, and they should live in this very dharmic way, and they should separate, they shouldn't be together all the time like this. And it seems very primitive maybe, but we understand again this idea that 3/4 of the life is meant for renunciation, and even the grihastha ashram is meant to cultivate that sense of renunciation, right? So it's not that it's just a full license for all the sense gratification you want, but the purpose of it is to, in a regulated way, allow people to fulfill their material desires, sex desire, and in such a way continue on and cultivate that sense of renunciation gradually through continuously hearing Shastra and hearing about the importance of this renunciation. Through Shastra and through also associating with, as we understand, the renunciates will come, see the grihastas, and they're ultimately sustained by them financially and such. And the way that they repay the grihastas is through giving spiritual knowledge and guidance in that way. And so they'll speak of the importance of, yes, you're in this situation now, but ultimately you have to give it up. And one has to go into the grihastha ashram with the idea of leaving it. One doesn't enter into the grihastha ashram with the idea of, what is this? Is hasta means fixed, is it? Hasta means fixed, right? Griha means home, and then hasta, I was hearing this, I think it means fixed. So, but it doesn't mean that one should become fixed in home life permanently in that way. But one should have this idea that, okay, this is a time in my life where I have to play out these different desires and ultimately become purified from them and ultimately renounce these things. But again, this idea that if the man is henpecked in such a way that he's controlled by the wife, there's no question of moving on to the vanaprastha ashram because she'll never let him. Why is that? Because the man is providing so much sense gratification for the woman, giving money, and he's the breadwinner, and he's bringing money and all these different things, and so the idea is that they'll never allow such a thing to happen. So the man, again, this is another reason that the man has to be in control in the house and has to be the leader, is that it's ultimately on him to renounce and to leave this situation after some time, once the sons are grown enough to take care of the mother and all these things. So yeah, it's quite yeah. So in the purport here, again, he's joking with her, very much glorifying his wife here, Diti. And Prabhupada says in the purport that Kaśyapa meant that householders living with wives enjoy the heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment and at the same time have no fear of going down to hell. So it's true. There is a level of protection in the grihastha ashram that is not afforded to the renunciates. And we understand that the path of spiritual life is like a razor's edge. It's very dangerous. And there's also, what is this? Padam, yadvi padam. That's danger at every step, right? Yes, there's danger at every step in this material world. And especially for those that are in such a situation where any getting in touch at all with sex life as a renunciate is the most abominable thing and leads to going to hell. Whereas, again, the householders get to live with a wife and enjoy the heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment, and they don't have to have that fear of going to hell. So in some ways, it's actually very favorable, and it's very protected in that way. But it's a double-edged sword, because that protection is there, but also this idea of becoming entangled is also there. And this propensity, there's a chance, a strong chance, if one is not sober and, again, listening and studying Shastra and listening to, the renunciates, the advice of, renunciates and, advanced devotees, other grihastas that are advanced in devotional service. If one isn't taking guidance in that way and is just simply listening to their own mind and becoming controlled by their emotions rather than their intelligence, the natural inclination of such a situation is that one becomes very entangled and very bound up in this household life. And then, again, there's these blessings of sense enjoyment and the not having fear of going down to hell that's there in the household or ashram. But at the same time, it's interesting because Prabhupada's saying in the purport that they get these things, but we understand in devotional service that that's actually not the purpose of life at all. Obviously, sense enjoyment, we can understand, intellectually at least, we can understand that that's miserable and there's actually no enjoyment there. And again, the point of the grihastha ashram is actually to bring one to that understanding. So one goes in with the idea with material desires that have to be worked through, but ultimately the point is to get to the level and to the understanding, the practical realization through lived experience that there's actually no enjoyment in this material world, right? So we come in with the idea that we're going to enjoy, and then eventually that is disproven through our experience. We see the misery of all this sense gratification that we've been afforded the opportunity to have. So we obviously understand that sense enjoyment is not the purpose of life. And then no fear of going down to hell. Well, again, that's not the goal of life, is to not go to hell. The goal of life is to, there's multiple different definitions that Prabhupada has given actually throughout his books. One is to, attain love of Krishna, become a pure devotee, liberation, these kinds of things. There's one interesting definition he gave here. If you go to 9:1840, the Purport. So renunciation of material enjoyment is the ultimate goal of human life. So here Prabhupada is saying, renunciation of material enjoyment is the ultimate goal of human life. Therefore, the Varnashram institution is most scientific. It aims at giving one the facility to return home back to Godhead, which one cannot do without completely renouncing all connections with the material world. So, quite interesting that, renunciation of material enjoyment. But again, in this purport is saying that getting the heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment, is the result of, the householders get to do this. But again, this is quite opposite. Renunciation of material enjoyment is the ultimate goal of human life. And so, love of Krishna, liberation, renunciation of material enjoyment, they all actually go hand in hand. Because the only way we can actually attain love of Krishna is by attaining this complete renunciation of material enjoyment. As long as we have any kind of trace of material desire or hankering in our heart, we can't attain this pure love of Krishna, and we can't actually attain liberation. So we're stuck in this material world birth after birth. So this renunciation of material enjoyment being the ultimate goal of human life is a very important point to understand. And I've been reading through lately the 11th canto, the Uddhava Gita and things like that. And even before that, there's so many different passages. I don't know, I'm not going to pull anything up specifically, but when you're just reading through like chapter after chapter, that it keeps talking about renunciation and detachment from material enjoyment. And I found it very, very, enlivening. And I just really it's been probably one of my favorite sections of the Bhagavatam to read so far. I want to definitely revisit it. But by just hearing that over and over and over and over again, it creates a sense of whoa. And one thing that kept being emphasized over and over in that section that just stuck with me is that the dreamlike nature of this world, of our material existence, that just as in a dream, when you're having so many, you might be enjoying or suffering in a dream, but the second you wake up from that dream, pretty much instantly you're able to just realize it was a dream, first of all, and then as soon as you realize it was a dream, you completely let go of any kind of enjoyment or suffering you had in that situation, and it doesn't affect you at all. It's just, it's just completely gone. It's just, and you see, okay, it was completely useless. Everything that happened in that dream, all the money I got, all the sex I had, all the, whatever, all the, I was suffering and I was, whatever, like crazy things were happening. I was in a war or something. All of that's just, it's just phantasmagoria. It's completely nuts. So, but actually, that's the same situation we're in now. We don't realize that. We wake up out of that dream and then we are in another dreamlike state and we immediately identify with this body and think, okay, I'm in the temple here in Atlanta and I have to do this and that. And actually, when we're thinking about devotional service, that's not within that category, of course. But as soon as we're thinking about, let me enjoy this thing in this world and enjoy that temporary thing in this world, as long as we're trying to enjoy anything in that temporary way, we're in that dreamlike stupor. And we're under the spell of Maya, ultimately. And so, of course, that applies maybe perhaps most significantly in terms of trying to enjoy the opposite sex and enjoy these heavenly pleasures of sense enjoyment, as has been saying, heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment. So, anyways, just a reflection there that reading that section is very nice because, and again, it comes back to the point that the point of the entire Varnashram system is to come to this point of renunciation of material enjoyment and to understand that that's the ultimate goal of human life. But for almost everyone, the point is that it's a gradual process. Conditioned souls, everyone in this material world is, by definition, and every conditioned soul has sex desire and has material desires by definition. So, and for most of us, it takes a lot of time to work through that. And so we have this more conducive situation, or more, you could say, long-term, safer situation in which we can work through those things and at the same time read this kind of thing in the Bhagavatam over and over again and actually come to the point of practical realization and really understanding it through, again, experiencing the non-blissful situation of so-called material enjoyment that we're experiencing in that ashram. So again, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because in one situation, in one sense, you could say, there is, like it's saying here, there's a protection that happens with the man and the grihastha ashram. He's protected from going down to hell, whereas the so-called man of the renounced order, who has left his house and wife, goes to hell if he again desires sexual pleasure, knowingly or unknowingly. In that way, the householders are on the side of safety. So they're more safe, right? And so that's one edge of that sword. And the other edge is this idea of this potential to become very much entangled in this household life and this material life, and not and lose sight of that goal of coming out the other side and entering into the Vanaprastha ashram and ultimately, either going on to sannyas or just becoming renounced again. It's important that one starts their life in the brahmacharya ashram and traditional life, 5 to 25, in order to cultivate that understanding of renunciation and get some kind of taste for that, so that when it's time to renounce again at the time of vanaprastha, then one knows, okay, I'm going back into that, and it's much more kind of not easy, but it's more approachable, someone's more able to do it in such a situation because they've already been there before, so it's more familiar to them in a way. I wanted to read some other stuff. This is from Canto 4, Chapter 27, Text 1. This is about Puranjana. So, okay. The great sage Narada continued, "My dear king, after bewildering her husband in different ways and bringing him under her control, the wife of King Puranjana gave him all satisfaction and enjoyed sex life with him. So after hunting in the forest, King Puranjana returned home, and after refreshing himself by taking a bath and eating nice food, he searched for his wife. When he saw her lying down on the ground without a bed, as if neglected, and devoid of any proper dress, he became very much aggrieved. He then became attracted to her and began to enjoy her company. A living entity is similarly engaged in the material world in sinful activities. These sinful activities may be compared to King Puranjana's hunting in the forest." Okay, then this I want to... Okay. A sinful life can be counteracted by various processes of religion such as yajna, vrata, and dana, that is, the performance of sacrifices, the taking of a vow for some religious ritual, and the giving of charity. In this way, one may become free from the reactions of sinful life and at the same time awaken his original Krishna consciousness. By coming home, taking his bath, eating nice foodstuffs, getting refreshed, and searching out his wife, King Puranjana came to his good consciousness in his family life. In other words, a systematic family life as enjoined in the Vedas is better than an irresponsible, sinful life. So that's again the point that I'm making too, is that this system of varnashram is set up so that one can channel their material desires in a pious way, not in a sinful way. And if it's just like society now, cats and dogs, everyone's running here and there, going with this person, that person, live in relationships, all this kind of thing, it just leads to complete degradation, and there's no chance for self-realization, no chance for spiritual life. Whereas this regulated way of household life, of course, again, training in the brahmacharya ashram, then regulated life and household life, and then understanding that going into renunciation, after that, this is conducive for actual Krishna consciousness, this is the system that Krishna has given. And then if you continue on, okay, if a husband and wife, this is what I'm going to read. If a husband and wife combine together in Krishna consciousness and live together peacefully, that is very nice. However, if a husband becomes too much attracted by his wife and forgets his duty in life, the implications of materialistic life will again resume. So, very important. This is a very big if, you could say. If a husband and wife combine together in Krishna consciousness and live together peacefully, that is very nice. But it's much easier said than done. We see it, in our society. It's very difficult, and even though, generally I would say that, in general, devotees are quite sincere people, and they don't have like bad intentions. But so many things happen, and we see so much divorce in our society. We see so many, just failed relationships, failed marriages, and it's really how quickly sometimes it happens. I've seen so many times, like within like a couple years even, they're already, separated or divorced or something like that. And it's just mind-blowing because, again, we talk about this a lot, but these, other societies, other religious societies, such as like I don't know the divorce rate in the Amish community, but I'm sure it seems probably pretty low. And then there's these Bruderhof and other kind of communities like this, where there's zero divorce. It's just amazing. But again, this is one point there is that, well, a lot of times, this was brought up by, I think, Chandan Charpu was talking about this morning, that a lot of times the grihasas in Krishna consciousness movement don't have much or any support from the institution in terms of moving into that ashram. And then what happens is, unfortunately, that they have to work in this world, and then because they don't have that community, like, for example, these Bruderhofs they have their own basically small society where they all have their business that they do as a community, and they all live there, and they're not so much in touch with the modern materialistic sinful civilization. But many times devotees will have to, just out of necessity, move into such a situation where they're in touch with that society. And then where's the support? Where's the senior devotees to give guidance? Where's the supporting community to help them out? And so it's very, very difficult. But that's what we're aiming to do here by starting this farm community, is to create a situation where people can come and live on the farm and practice Krishna consciousness, and no matter what ashram they're in, and be able to have a conducive environment that is not subject to all these, very horrible situations in the modern material world, with all these, just terrible things. So much. The entire atmosphere is just dripping with, sex desire and illicit sex, and all the four pillars of sinful life are just what basically the pillars of modern civilization is built on. So to have such a situation as a community where people can live like that is very, very conducive. And I wanted to read this because this is also relevant. I found this very inspiring. This is from Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life. Let me see if I can find it. Again, it's just describing the situation. So the name of this devotee is Ranganathan. And he was born into a Brahmin family, Sri Vaishnava Brahmin family, and he describes his childhood here. And I thought, again, we're trying to do something similar like this, but to see that, I guess this was maybe less than 100 years ago that this was happening, something like that. And to see, again, we're talking very theoretically, you could say. In the West, at least, it hasn't been done so much, amongst like devotional society in our movement. But to see that actually this was just commonplace not too long ago in India, and thousands and millions of people even have been part of societies like this. So he lived in a community of Brahmanas, and everyone in the community pretty much was Brahmanas, it said. I just wanted to read a few sections here. So yeah, you were born in Bhakti-Vikas Swami says, you were born in a Brahmana family, Ranganathan. Yes. In Sarangalam, there is a temple of Lord Srinivasan there that is more than 1,000 years old. In South India, Brahmanas engaged in the service of the Lord live in an area around the temple called the Agraharam, the Brahmana housing quarter. So this is what he was saying. Okay, so the temple would have a high square wall around it, and on all four sides would be the Agraharam. In our village, the Agraharam consisted of about 200 Vaishnav houses, all big houses with big families. So there must have been at least 2,000 people living in the Agraharam. And together with other castes, a total of about 5,000 people in the village. So it's interesting because there was an actual section of the village that was just the Brahmanas, and he's saying there was 2,000 people living there in 200 homes. So again, it's very interesting and inspiring to me. Just think, and the way he described the life is just so blissful. Behind the houses of the western street, there was a rivulet called Pamani, a branch of the Kaveri. There was also a big tank just south of the temple walls. It was filled with water from the Pamani, to which it was connected by a short canal. Beyond the Agraharam, there was a temple of Lord Shiva facing the Srinivasan temple. And then they talk about, there was one Shiva temple, and there was just one family that worshipped there. This is interesting here. Did anyone follow any of these bogus incarnations or yogis? As Maharaj says this. And he said, we never heard of any of these rascals. We only knew the Supreme Lord Vishnu and his bona fide servants. So tell me something about your early life. What was your father doing? He was mainly looking after land and properties. The annual income came from land, as it did for most of the Brahmanas at the time. Didn't the Brahmanas in the Agraharam have duties at the temple? Yes, but most of them didn't have daily duties. That was only for certain families who were called archakar. Others would have duties only on festivals and worshipped a shalagram at home. But when they all visit the Srinivasan temple daily, of course, no one could think of conducting his daily affairs without first having darshan of the Lord. Everyone was eager to see him, who was the center of their lives. Their normal morning routine was to get up at 4:30 or 5, go to the field for passing stool, and then take a bath. They would always go to the river for taking bath. The family well was used only for housework. And then after taking bath, they would put on tilak, perform their sanya vandanam, and chant the sacred Gayatri mantra 108 times. So they would do that, and then they would go to the temple and take darshan. All of them, the whole family, the women, the men, the children, they would all go together to the temple and take darshan of the Lord first thing in the morning. And it's, again, I won't go through this whole entire thing, but it talks kind of about what the man would do and then what the women would do. The women would cook really nice breakfast and everything like that. But it's very inspiring to see that, first of all, what we're doing, other, religions are also doing it, and they're already succeeding in it quite well. In the modern world, in America, in 2025, they're doing it. And to see that, just not very long ago, there was these nice societies with 2,000 brahmanas and 5,000 total people in the village, and it was going on so nicely. I mean, all the different interviews, and actually this is really, if anybody hasn't read this book, really highly recommend it, because the different interviews he Maharaj gives or gets from different devotees are very inspiring, because they all, had more or less a similar kind of experience. Very simple life, living in a village, and Krishna was the center of their lives, of their whole family's lives, and that was just their daily activities revolved around that. And this is what we're aiming to do, we're striving to go towards in this farm project that we're doing. But it can seem kind of like, well, is it practical? Has anybody ever done this? And yeah, they've been doing it for thousands of years, And so it's not something that crazy or that foreign. It's crazy and foreign to us who are very conditioned by modern life, but it's definitely possible to do. And the idea is that we're aiming to create something that's multi-generational, not just something that we do and then, that's it, it burns out. But we're aiming to establish a more or less permanent situation for devotees to be born and raised, and also, of course, there's preaching outside for outsiders to bring them in as well, but to create a situation that is attractive for everyone, and so that it's attractive for the children, that they grow up in a situation and they don't want to leave, like we see again in this Bruderhof. They give them the chance, they get to leave and go, be in the world if they want, and then many of them leave and most come back, or a lot of them at least come back, and they say, no, they see, because they were raised in such a nice environment, they see immediately through the Maya, or the terrible nature of this modern society, and they're not bewildered by it. They're not tricked by it, like I was myself, being attracted to, the material progress and sense gratification and all these kinds of things. So yeah, there's, I could go on, but I'll open up for questions, if there's any questions or comments. Nothing? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasinubhyavcha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.